Hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Andy Frisky. On behalf of the entire team, so stoked to have you with us for today's event. And as we get started, we always like to learn where our community of dreamers is joining us from and encourage you to share if you are comfortable in the chat section. I'm from a sunny but cold downtown Madison, Wisconsin today. Um, and for those of you who've attended our virtual or in-person events in the past, welcome back. And for anyone who is just joining us for the first time, I'd love to take a few moments and introduce you to DreamBank. So here at American Family Insurance, life is better when you're under our roof because when you feel totally supported and protected, any dream is possible. And that's why we created DreamBank. It's an inspirational community destination and virtual experience designed to help people pursue, achieve, and protect their dreams. And at DreamBank, there's something for every dreamer, from our weekly events to immersive signature programs, special events, and on-demand content. Or our free programming and resources are designed to bring you inspiration, motivation, and support, no matter your interest. And you can check out our upcoming virtual and in-person events at amfam.com/dreambank and reserve your spot today. Before we go ahead and kick things off, love to cover a couple of housekeeping items. I know I called it out to a couple folks in here, but go ahead and use the chat section for any questions that you may have for Dan. I know that there'll be time baked in for that, and he's ready to answer those questions. Any issues you may be encountering, technical issues, we'll do our best to kind of help support and troubleshoot alongside with you. And then there will be a brief post-event survey that will be shared to the email address in which you used to register today. Just takes a few moments to fill out, really helps us kind of dictate and guide the types of content that we put out for you as well. So thank you so much for that. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dan LaCloche today to talk about storytelling with video. I know that he's got a lot to share. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Dan. Dan, take it away.
Well, good afternoon, or perhaps good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. Um, I am going to start sharing my screen so we can just get right into the presentation. Okay, looks good. Well, the first thing I wanted to tell you is that there will be some rust here. And the reason for that is I haven't done this in a while. I was actually scheduled to do a presentation at DreamBank literally just days after the lockdown and pandemic, and it's taken me a while to find my way back here, but I'm glad I'm here and I hope I can share a lot of information that'll be useful for everybody. Um, and secondly, I'm a visual artist, so stringing a lot of words together and making them make sense is a little challenging for me, so please bear with me. And then finally, I do have a dream of becoming an inspirational speaker someday. So I'm hoping that my time here will help me sort of practice that a little bit. And I just ask for your patience as we work our way through this. So let's get started. Um, gonna- so we're all here to talk about storytelling today, and more specifically, visual storytelling. And I guess even more specifically than that is visual storytelling for business, and how you can use simple storytelling techniques in your next video to help you connect a little bit better with your customers. With that said, I'm Video Dan, and let's get into it. So, why are you here today? Why is it important? Why should you even listen to what I have to say? A couple reasons for that. The first reason is the word video is right in my name. I'm known around these parts as Video Dan. Um, so you figure with the word video in my name, I must know a little something about visual storytelling. Number two, I've been creating videos for over 35 years now. I edited my first project in the 1900s. I think it was actually 1990 was the first time I edited a video. Fell in love with it and been doing it ever since. Thirdly, I used to teach this stuff at a college level for many years in Chicago. I think it was 5 or 6 years, but also in the Chicago public school system. I used to teach these same techniques to grade schoolers. So I've taught college, grade school, even some senior citizens. Uh, and then finally, um, a reason why you should listen to me is people just keep hiring me to make their videos. So I've got to be doing something right. I mean, and the proof is in the pudding. And just to sort of echo what Andy was saying, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to type them in the chat. Andy will break in with any important questions, whether they be about video or I'll even take a question about pudding if you have one. So let's just get into it. So the things I want to cover today. Firstly, why I use storytelling in a business context. I want to talk a little bit about my preferred storytelling structure. There are a lot of storytelling structures out there, but I want to talk about the one I like to use best and why I use it. Um, Identifying your audience and message. This is a very important topic to cover because this sort of even precedes crafting the story. Because if you don't know your audience and what your message is, you can tell the most beautiful story in the world, but you're telling it to the wrong people. Number four, uh, we'll do some breakdown and analysis of not only some classic DLC video examples that I've created, but also some other commercials that I think show are great examples of what we're talking about. And then finally, and I know there'll be time at the end for questions and answers, but feel free to ask questions anywhere during the presentation. I'm happy to answer any and all questions, even questions about pudding. All right, let's go. So, the first thing I want to talk about is why use storytelling for business. Well, there are kind of three main things. Stories can bring emotion. They can sort of wrap that message you're trying to transmit in a context, and it gives it structure. All these three things help the information that you're trying to transmit to your audience. It helps it be received well on the other end. And that's always really the goal when you're transmitting information is you want to transmit it in a way that makes it easy for the audience to receive. And you're saying at this point, well, tell me more about that, Dan. And I'd be happy to do that. Regarding the emotional connection, um, so stories, when you wrap a piece of information in a story that has a high emotional connection to your audience, that helps them remember the content, remember that content that you're trying to share with them, which in a business context is a great thing. If you can remain top of mind, if you can have that piece of information in their head when they're making that purchasing decision, there's nothing better. Um, there's also cognitive engagement. So stories kind of tap into a part of the human brain that recognizes patterns. Now, the human brain is sort of hardwired to find patterns in things. We've all looked up at a cloud and seen somebody's face in that cloud. That's pattern recognition. So if you can use something in your stories that taps into that part of the brain, that's great because it also helps sort of take complex concepts and break them down into something that's more easily understandable by the audience. Thirdly, let's talk about context a little bit. So, when you're telling a story, most people put a story in a real life situation that helps sort of reinforce that message. So, when you're telling a story, you typically put it in an environment that the audience understands. And again, that just helps them receive the message easily, more clearly, helps them remember. And then I want to touch a little bit about cultural transmission. Now, this isn't quite as important, in my opinion, as the other three, but just to share a little story about cultural transmission in a business context is you can tell a story that has some cultural significance to it. An example I have is um, brand loyalty. Um, Brand loyalty can be passed down through generations. My dad was a big Coca-Cola fan. He didn't care for Pepsi that much. So we always had Coca-Cola in our house. And that brand loyalty sort of got passed down to me. I'm a Coke drinker rather than Pepsi. So cultural transmission, passing brand awareness through generations is kind of an important thing, but not as important in a storytelling context. And then finally, universal appeal. So when you're telling a visual story, it can break down all kinds of barriers. I believe actually one of the examples I'm going to show a little bit later in this presentation doesn't even have dialogue, and it doesn't need dialogue. You can break barriers across cultures, language, age, and it helps your story be more inclusive. Oh, and look at that. We have our first example. Um, like I mentioned, this particular example, there's no dialogue in this commercial, but I defy anyone to watch this commercial and not tear up a little bit. I actually brought a tissue because I haven't been able to watch this commercial without crying yet. I've watched it about 7 or 8 times. I'm hoping this time maybe I won't cry, but let's look at it as an example and then we'll kind of talk about it afterwards.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. But I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be with the world, 1,000 miles, to fall down at your door.
Well, I didn't make it through. I cried a little bit just at the end. Um, so this particular example that I just showed you uses a story structure called the hero's journey. Now, this is not my preferred story structure, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But let's talk about that commercial a little bit. I mean, in my opinion, it was 99% emotion and just 1% branding right at the end. Like, you didn't even, I mean, there was no, during that 1 minute commercial, not until the end when the Budweiser logo came up, was there any acknowledgement that it was even tied to a brand, which is okay in a with a strong brand like Budweiser. You don't really have to like hit people over the head with the Budweiser brand. You just want to remind them right at the end a little bit. So that's why they could lean into such an emotional commercial because they didn't need to continually tie it back to the brand until the very end. So now that I've sort of let the cat out of the bag and told you that the hero's journey is not my preferred storytelling structure, I want to share what that is. I prefer the three-act story structure. And more specifically, for me, it's more like closer to two acts. I like to call it 2.176 act story structure. And at this point, you might be asking, well, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about it. I'm going to tell you some more things. There are dozens and dozens of different kind of storytelling structures. As we just saw an example, there was a hero's journey. My preferred is the three-act story structure. There's even something called the 7-point story structure. The reason I like the three-act story structure is in a business context, you often have limited time to transmit that message you're trying to get to your audience. So the simpler, the more basic the structure, the quicker you can get that information to your audience, and it leaves them feeling less confused. You know, I've never used the 7-point story structure before, but just the name of it sounds way more complex than the 2.176 story structure that I use. And just to sort of break it down for you into its most basic pieces, the three-act story structure is simply acts one, two, and three. In act one, typically you're sort of introducing the characters, the environment. This is when you're laying down the basics, sort of wrapping it in that context that we talked about earlier. The second act is when the conflict arises. And of course, in act three, that's when we resolve that conflict. So you have the introduction, the conflict, and the resolution. And then, more specifically, the way I do it is I sort of take that basic structure and I even simplify it from there. When I say essentially I'm doing a two-act story structure, um, you notice that I like to sort of get rid of act one altogether almost. I mean, then for a, in a business context, instead of saying introduction, conflict resolution, I like to say problem solution. Um, so And when you kind of squish that down into now two acts, like I said, it makes the information more clear. It helps you sort of get the information to your audience much faster. And a lot of the times, and I'll show examples of this coming up, the viewer actually becomes the main character of the video content. So here's another example. This one now, it's another Budweiser commercial. However, this one follows more of that three-act kind of story structure rather than the hero's journey. So let's check it out.
Since I was born, I dreamed of being a Budweiser Clydesdale. Only problem is, I was born a donkey. So all my life, I practiced the Clydesdale walk and the Clydesdale pull. I even tried hair extensions on my lower legs. And then came my big interview. They looked me in the eye and said, "What makes you think you can be a Clydesdale, son?" And what was my answer? I must have said something right.
So this one was more sort of a funny commercial, which is great. But let's do a little breakdown of the donkey beer commercial. Um, and I want to break it down sort of by those three acts. So in the first act, we got introduced to the main character who is the donkey. We sort of got immersed into his environment out there on the farm. And then we went straight into Act Two. And the problem was he's a donkey. He wanted to be a Clydesdale. He wanted to be part of the Budweiser Clydesdale team, but he's got this big sort of block in the way, and that's the fact that he's not even a horse, he's a donkey. But he finds creative ways to sort of overcome that. And in Act Three, he sort of tries three different things. He practices walking like a Clydesdale, he practices the beer pull, and then finally, even hair extensions on his legs. And I sort of wanted to take a minute to talk about those three examples because it's kind of like a story within a story. And because this was more of a comedy commercial, um, they used a storytelling technique in the middle of it all called the rule of threes. Now, the rule of threes is something that is used in comedy quite a bit. Um, and we saw that in the three examples when he was walking around, practicing walking like a Clydesdale, pulling that little six pack of beer, and then finally the hair extensions. Now, this rule of threes is usually just sort of described as like setup, reinforce, and then a surprise. I like to think of it as sort of you sort of set up the joke, then your second example continues that pattern, and then the third example is sort of the twist. In this particular example, all three examples were funny, but they sort of stacked them by from least funny to the most funny example. So walking like a Clydesdale, yeah, I mean, if you were a donkey and you wanted to practice, you'd probably have to do that. Then sort of the visual comedy of him pulling just that little six pack of beer around on a wagon. But then finally, the funniest and the third in the rule of threes was the surprising part of hair extensions. So you don't see many donkeys with hair extensions. And then, of course, after all that didn't work, they went even farther over the top, and he just yelled at them with a bray. So this is how that particular commercial could be broken down into their three acts. But now let's switch it up a bit. Let's switch gears. I want to go through sort of a hypothetical. I thought, what could I do in this presentation to sort of give you an example, sort of behind the scenes, like how I would approach using the three-act story structure in a hypothetical example. So we're going to talk about just a product that I made up, and we're going to want to, like I mentioned before, identify the audience and the message that our client wants to transmit to their audience. And then after that, we can sort of figure out what kind of stories we can tell. So, the hypothetical product we'll be dealing with today is roll-on deodorant. More specifically, this fictitious client has created a product. It's deodorant for old people. There's an untapped market there that they think they can really capitalize on. The product name, deodorant. So now we have the product. We've had our first meeting with the client. And what do we want to do first? We want to identify the audience and the message. So again, in a business context, you really want to figure out who you're talking to. Who in this audience is going to purchase this product? Now, in our example, it's going to be older people that might have some underarm odor issues and the people who love them. So now we have our audience identified, and we want to sort of identify the message. Now, typically in a business context, the message is kind of basic. We want the audience to purchase this product. And now that we have the message and we have the audience in focus, we can start talking about wrapping a story around this. And the way I like to start putting a story together again is to not start at Act 1, but let's just go straight to the problem. What's the problem here? The problem is some older people might have some underarm odor issues. And then in Act 3, how are we going to solve this problem? Now, once we sort of start percolating those things, we can go back and pick a main character. Now, once you've sort of decided on who the main character of your video content is going to be, it sort of dictates like what kind of stories can be told. Um, it could be fantasy, it could be sort of documentary style, it could be all sorts of different things, but it really comes down to picking that main character. Now, for this particular, if we were doing like a Facebook ad or some kind of commercial for this new product, you know, I would pick probably an old person to be the main character. And if I'm just brainstorming here, let's think, fade up to an assisted living facility. Maybe there's an old man here with glasses on. He's sitting by himself at a lunch table. He looks over at the other tables. There are other old people there laughing and having fun. And he's doesn't understand why nobody is at his lunch table. Then maybe one of his friends walks up and just leaves the product, the underarm deodorant on the table, smiles and walks away. We cut to the next day. All of a sudden, he's at that same lunch table, but now he has people around him. Everyone's laughing, having a good time, and having fun. Why is that? Because he used the product. So that's just, off the top of my head, that could be one scenario. There are hundreds of stories you could come up with for an old person as the main character. Sometimes, like I mentioned before, um, in commercials or content that you'll see on social media, uh, the viewer of the content could be considered the main character. Uh, so we'll talk about that shortly, but I also just wanted to bring up maybe a fun way to tell this story could also be using like the actual roll-on deodorant as the main character. Maybe it could be like a little superhero deodorant that flies around and gets up into people's armpits and makes them smell good. So there's always tons of different ways you could tell that story. But right now, I want to get back to some more examples. Now we're getting into examples that I've created, um, not only to promote my business, but like I mentioned before, this is what people hire me to do for them as well. So we're going to look at a few videos that I've created, and I've chosen ones where I'm sort of promoting my business and my content on social media. And then after each one, we'll talk about them a little bit. So, oh yes, reminder. So this could be a perfect time to chime in after we look at an example. If you have any questions, go ahead. I'm sure Andy will break in with any important questions. So here's the first example. Um, and before I play this example, I just want to explain to anybody who may not know, uh, sometime around 2018, I created a tutorial series that I launched on LinkedIn to sort of grow my network and sort of my brand and my and recognition of who I am and what I do. So I created a tutorial series called 10-Second Toots. Currently, there are 99 episodes, and each episode, as the title implies, it's 10 seconds each. So each 10-second toot, of course, short for tutorial. My audience were marketers because I do a lot of work with marketers. So I wanted to just put out things that little tips and tricks for marketers or other video content creators. So with that in mind, let's check out the first 10-second toot, and then afterwards we'll break it down into the three-act story structure and identify what was happening. And one more thing before I press play here is, as a video content creator, I've when I came up with the idea for 10-second toots, it was super exciting to me because it was sort of it's a challenge to see like how in what short amount of time can you still tell a story. So let's check it out. A walk and talk adds energy to your selfie video. Need more energy? Try a run and talk. So that's the first example. Let's break it down. The run and talk. So for Act One, now this is one of those examples where the viewer is the main character. Like I mentioned, I was wanting the people at home watching this feeling this, and I wanted them to sort of be the main character. And it's sort of a giveaway whenever, I should say not whenever, most times when somebody is directly addressing the camera, they're looking right into the camera. Typically, that means they're sort of making the viewer the main character. Um, so for Act Two, the problem in this video that I was pointing out and then trying to solve is, you know, you're the main character, you're at home, you're feeling like, wow, your videos don't really have that much energy. What's a way I could create more energy? The solution, of course, do a walk and talk. We've all seen people walking and talking in their videos, and it gives it more energy, it makes it more interesting. And of course, if you needed even more energy on top of that, you could try the run and talk. Now, I would advise against that. I mean, you have to really practice that run and talk. I was running at full speed, and before I recorded that, I checked the ground. I looked for any tripping hazards or anything like that. So, walk and talks, I will say they do add energy. But if you're set on doing a run and talk, make sure the path you choose is smooth. There's nothing to trip over, because I don't want anybody getting hurt out there just creating content. Let's look at another example. This is another 10-second toot, and we'll just watch through it and then we'll break it down.
Dan LaCloche, 10-second toots. Forgot to take the lens cap off your camera? Easy fix. Just tell everybody it's a podcast.
So again, another quick tip for content creators there. So again, Act One, we're just introducing the character. Again, the main character was the audience, the viewer. Now, the problem that we were trying to overcome was we've all had that moment where you think you've captured the perfect piece of content only to realize something's gone wrong. In this example, I left my lens cap on the camera. So sometimes you have to pivot. And then the solution to that was you pivot to a podcast. Just tell everyone it was a podcast. They'll never know the difference. And finally, a third example from me. This one's a little bit longer than 10 seconds, of course. This is it's still in the same sort of vein. It's another tutorial, but let's just watch and talk about it after.
Hello, friends. Video Dan here. Let's talk about using the right tools. A lot of people say to me, Video Dan, you're a natural in front of the camera and behind it. Number one, thank you so much for that. And it's all part of my hashtag personal brand. And number two, I'm not that good. I just happen to know the right tools to use to get the best out of anyone I put in front of my camera, including me, Video Dan. Video Dan.
Okay, so let's break this one down. Again, the viewer is the main character. I feel like I do that quite a bit, especially in the content I create. I've done different social media video content for businesses, local businesses here in the Madison, Wisconsin area, for e-bikes and for different new products, product rollouts. And typically the fastest sort of way to get that information to the viewer is to have the viewer be the main character. Um, so Act Two, in this particular video, maybe you're you're at home, you want to create more content, but you don't feel very smooth or very confident on camera. You stumble over words, kind of like me, as I mentioned early on in this presentation. Uh, I'm a visual artist, so making words make sense can be challenging sometimes, but you know what? I use a teleprompter sometimes. So, in this particular example, the problem was, hey, if you don't feel the most comfortable or smooth on camera, solution, try using a teleprompter. Of course, using a teleprompter is a whole other skill, and you do have to practice that a little bit, but that was sort of the main point of this piece of content. Hey, we're up to the Q&A portion of the presentation. If you have any Q's, I might have some A's. Andy, do we have anything
Yeah.
out there?
Yeah, we had one come in. People really enjoyed the 10-second toots. So the first question came in is I filmed the whole video and there was no sound. Is there a video that or a 10-second toot for that?
You know what? There can be. We should connect. Whoever asked that question, I love brainstorming. That happens. You record some content and then you realize it didn't work out. I've only had, well, I've been doing this for 35 years. I have a couple horror stories. In the early days, I remember um, back when I was still shooting and editing wedding videos, very early in my career. I was working with somebody, and it was their job to bring enough videotape. And about two-thirds of the way through the wedding, I started to realize we weren't going to have enough videotape to record the whole thing, and it was a disaster. So, yes, things go wrong sometimes, but that's sort of, to me, when things go wrong, it's sort of like this weird chance to make something funny or make something, because we all have these situations in life, and it's very universal, but um, I would like to get together and talk about maybe making a 10-second toot when what happens when you record something without audio. Um, Anything else out there, Andy, before I move
Yeah.
on?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Some other good stuff here. So do you tailor your videos to the platform you're posting to?
Yes, I mean there are certain um, physical, I guess, constraints. Like, the main one I can think about is vertical video versus horizontal video. If you're doing something for a client's YouTube channel, you're going to have that that landscape shape that we're all used to, like watching our TV or movies. And honestly, there's a lot more room to tell a story in that landscape profile than there is vertical. Um, you can show a lot more of the environment, which really helps, again, build that contextual piece that's so important in act one of the three-act story structure. So you can get away with a little bit more like visual cues in that landscape rather than like vertical. If you were doing a TikTok, you mostly it's just either someone doing a dance or like it's basically just on that person. You can't really see around that much what they're doing. So it you can still craft a great story and tell stories in vertical video, but in my opinion, you can tell the story a little bit better in horizontal, in landscape mode, more like a YouTube or a Facebook ad. And that's my answer, Andy.
I like it. I think those are good tips and good things to consider. Next question is any tips for breaking through the clutter of other ads?
Well, I don't know if, well, I people have expressed to me that I'm a little bit different than most people, which I think is an advantage for me because most ideas I come up with are kind of different. So they already sort of cut through the noise. Cutting through the noise is already baked into it. But I guess I would say see what's out there. If there's a similar product that's already on the market, try doing telling a story that's maybe opposite of what everybody else is doing. I mean, that's sort of when they zig, you zag. It's sort of like that. Comedy always helps a little bit. People seem to like funny ads. Those seem to be more memorable than other kinds. If there's a way to inject even a little fun or a little comedy into something, I'm always trying to do that with my clients. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. I know you and I have had some discussions around just kind of the persona or online, and I think you do a really good job weaving in, your own personality, which I find to be humorous, certainly. Um, Next question. When using video editing software, is it better to use lots of animations and special effects, or do you feel it takes away from the video overall?
Well, interestingly enough, I think I did a 10-second toot about this where, I mean, you can overdo it, but the thing about video content is, and the thing I used to tell my students when I was teaching this is, I want to teach people the rules so they know where those like guardrails are. But then knowing where the guardrails are, sometimes if you break those rules, that gets more eyes on something. So, um, I would say use sound effects, use special effects, do it all. I mean, you're trying to get people's eyeballs. You're trying to, first of all, get people to look at something, but then you're trying to get them to remember it too. So, um, I'm all about using special effects, using sound effects, all that kind of stuff. Of course, you can go overboard, but sometimes that can be funny too.
I like it. I like it. And I guess kind of building on that response that you had there, what are some of the common mistakes you see in ads or videos that cause them to fail or maybe not perform as well? I think that, this question's really in the context of business videos or making videos for one's business. So what are some common mistakes you see in marketing videos that ultimately cause them to fail or land flat?
Well, I mean, there are beyond story. I mean, I would say story sort of trumps everything else. If you have a strong story that really connects with people, either through emotion or just being really familiar with to the audience, like beyond that, I mean, there are some technical things that you should pay attention to a little bit. I mean, it always helps to have good audio and good lighting and all those kind of things. But the audience really will forgive almost anything as long as the story keeps them around. Um, so I'm just a story guy. If you can inject, I would say to help you stand out or to help you not just blend into the background noise, you got to wrap that message in a story. Um, a story's everything.
That's what I was gonna summarize that as story above everything else is what I'm hearing.
Yes, 100%.
I love it. I love it. Next question. How do you come up with video ideas consistently to post? So maybe like the idea generation behind, the video. So yeah, what are some of your process or how do you, is there a journal? Is it just off the cuff? But would love to hear, yeah, how do you come up with your ideas for your video posts?
Well, Video Dan comes up with ideas in a couple different ways. If I'm scrolling through social media, whether it be LinkedIn or Instagram, and I'm seeing something that annoys me, I'll write that down and then I will start creating a piece of content talking about why this particular thing annoys me. Um, well, gosh, what is it currently annoying me? Here's something that's annoying to me is, have you ever watched a TV show or a movie? Like everybody, when they're walking around with those to-go coffee cups, those cups are always empty. You can tell they're empty. It's so annoying. Like, why can't you just put water or something in? You see, like, somebody walking around with one of those trays where you put four coffee cups in, and they're holding it with like two fingers. There's no way that they could be holding all that coffee with like two fingers. So it takes me automatically out of the story, which you never want to do to your audience. Um, so to answer your question, I look for things that annoy me, and I like to make entertaining content around those things. Um, or I think sometimes right before I go to bed, I usually a couple ideas for content pop into my head there. One time I was doing, excuse me, I was working with an e-bike company. They needed uh, a series of Facebook ads to promote not only the products they were selling, but also the business itself. And I think this was two Christmases ago. It was in the middle of winter, and I came down with a really bad case of the flu, and I had a fever for a couple days. And in the middle of that fever, I came up with this kind of wacky idea, and I pitched it to them, and they went for it. So um, your ideas can come at the most unusual times. But for me, I look around and I look at trends and I see why maybe it might not be the best idea to follow those trends, and I'll create a piece of content about bucking a trend, or I'll just talk about something that's currently annoying me, the way maybe somebody sets up their camera or something like that. Or in the middle of a fever, I'll come up with an idea. Or before I go to bed. Those are when I get my best ideas.
I love it. I was gonna say, so get sick and then ideate, but
Yes.
I love it though. The inspiration strikes at any time, I think is a what I took away from that. Next question comes in from Janelle. What metrics do you use to determine if a video is successful?
Well, this might be controversial, but I don't really do metrics, and I'll tell you why. Because I usually get hired to just come up with the most entertaining piece of content, and then I pass that off to the marketers I work with, and they're typically doing all the analytics and things like that. But I mean, with that said, there is a biotech company that I do quite a bit of work for. I would say essentially 95% of the videos on their YouTube channel are things that I've created. And of course, it always feels good when I go wander over to their YouTube channel and look at all the views that they've had and things like that. But my metric, honestly, is testimonials from my clients. Like after I finish, I just finished a piece of content for one of my clients in San Francisco. It's a K through 12 private school. They just bought a new building. They're turning it into a sports complex. They're doing a capital campaign. They're trying to raise $350 million to renovate this building in downtown San Francisco. And they, so that's sort of like I check in with them every once in a while, like, hey, have you raised 350 million yet? That's sort of my metric is like, are the pieces of content I'm creating, are they living up to the hopes and dreams of the people and the clients that I'm working with?
I like that. I like that. And I guess, kind of a follow-up question, does your approach differ for clients who are maybe selling more expensive items versus less expensive items, or is it really just whatever that top tier piece of content or idea rises to the top is what is ultimately delivered? I'm sure, it ultimately depends on what is the product, what is the service, the industry that the company's in, but any difference in your approach, depending upon the product or service?
Well, this sort of harkens back to earlier in the presentation. It's before you can start coming up with the story or the idea for the content, you need to really, really get on the same page with your clients and say, who who are we showing this to? That dictates how you tell a story. If you're, selling underarm deodorant to senior citizens, you're not going to craft this spectacular skateboarding video, although you might if you have actors in their, 60s and 70s who can skateboard, that could be a funny video. But um, knowing your audience and knowing the message, those are so important. Like you want to boil down that message into the most basic thing. Like for most of the time, with my clients, it's like, buy this product. Like that's the message they want to get across because it's going to solve your problems. You have a problem, we have this product that solves that problem. And then it's just up to me to wrap that in a story. So, before you can even start thinking about what kind of stories, how you could tell the stories, what could make you stand out, I can't say it enough. You really have to lock in who the primary audience is and what that message is you're trying to get across.
I love it. And I know we're getting short on time here, so I think that's a good place to wrap questions. Dan, I really appreciate you sharing your insights and wisdoms here today. If people wanted to get in contact with you or to follow up, what's the best way for them to do that?
Great question, Andy. That brings me to my last slide. Uh, there's my LinkedIn. Let's connect on LinkedIn or shoot me an email. There's my cell number right there. If you want to text me, like I'm I'm just so excited to talk about video content. Like if you just want to like talk through an idea or just brainstorm or anything, let's do that. And I actually have a quick video to end on, Andy, if that's
Sure.
okay. I
Yes. Yep.
believe we have enough time here.
Yep.
As I was putting this presentation together, I found this little piece of content that I like to show my clients. It's about that emotional connection, heart, and humanity. And so, oh yeah, and if you scan that QR code, it goes straight to my YouTube channel, so you can see examples of more stuff I did to promote myself and also client work there too. So, without further ado, let's talk about heart and humanity because I think it fits really well with this presentation.
In a world saturated with content, it's easy to get lost in the noise. But what truly makes a video stand out? It's not just the visuals or special effects, it's the heart and the humanity behind it.
Hi there. Today we're going to explore how leading with heartfelt emotions and showing candid human interactions can elevate your videos and create a genuine connection with your audience.
First, let's talk about emotions. Emotions are universal. When you incorporate them into your storytelling, you tap into something deeply human that resonates with viewers.
Whether it's joy, sadness, or triumph, These emotions make your content relatable. Think about the last video that moved you. Chances are, it wasn't just the content itself, but the feelings that it evoked.
Next, let's focus on candid human interactions. Authenticity is key. People crave real connections, and candid moments can bridge that gap.
Instead of staged conversations, show the raw and unscripted interactions. This genuine portrayal fosters trust and invites viewers into the narrative, allowing them to see themselves in the story.
It's essential to remember that every video that you create is an opportunity to touch hearts. When your audience feels something, they'll remember that experience long after the video ends.
So how can you keep heart and humanity in your videos? Start by identifying the core message you want to convey. Ask yourself, how does this relate to human experience? What story am I trying to tell?
Remember, it's not just about reaching your audience, it's about connecting with them. Lead with authenticity, share genuine moments, and let your audience feel the heartbeat of your video.
Let's make videos that go beyond the screen. Let's create stories that inspire, connect, and remind us all of our shared humanity.
Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights on authentic storytelling.
What if they're watching this on a platform that doesn't have a subscription button?
All right, thanks everybody.
Dan, thank you so much. Thank you all to everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate that. I think it's a good place to end there. So we will cap it there. Dan, thanks again, and we will see you all next time. Take care.